Imagine a city shattered into a dozen isolated islands of defiance, each surrounded by a sea of fire, steel, and hostile troops. Above ground, communication is a death sentence. Any movement across a street draws sniper fire. Any open space is raked by machine guns. This was the daily reality of the Warsaw Uprising that began on August 1st, 1944. De Polishaume, Armia, Krakowa, Orache had taken up arms against the German occupiers, dreaming of liberating their capital before the advancing Soviet Red Army arrived. But the Germans reacted with savage, overwhelming force, methodically crushing district after district. The Polish resistance fighters found themselves holding disconnected pockets of the city. The old town, Rodmi, see the city center, Olibors, Mokotów, cut off from each other, they faced annihilation. Peace, yet, for 63 days, they held on, coordinated, and fought as a unified force. Their secret, a network that turned the city's underbelly into its central artery. While the world above burned, a different, darker war was waged in the absolute blackness beneath the pavement. This was the domain of the Kanawi's sewer couriers, mostly teenagers and young adults. These men and women became the insurgents' silent, stinking, and indispensable lifeline, transforming Warsaw's centuries-old sewage system into a clandestine postal, medical, and command network. Their story is one of the most extraordinary and horrifying chapters of urban resistance in history. The decision to use the sewers was born of sheer, desperate necessity. Within days of the uprising's start, German control of the main thoroughfares and their use of tanks and heavy artillery made surface movement between districts suicidal. The Poles needed a way to maintain contact between their isolated commands in the old town and the city center, the two main bastions of resistance. The sewer system presented itself as the only option. Warsaw's sewers, built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, were a vast, complex maze. Some tunnels were large enough for a person to walk upright. Others were narrow pipes, requiring crawling through raw effluent. They were pitch black, filled with toxic gases like methane and hydrogen sulfide, home to rats, and flowed with a foul cocktail of human waste, rainwater, and, increasingly, the blood of the city above. Navigating them required a special kind of courage, not the explosive bravery of a charge, but the slow, claustrophobic, and relentlessly grim courage to immerse oneself in literal filth for hours on end. The AK command quickly organized the sewer communication patrols. The couriers were often scouts, harsers, or local youths who knew the city intimately. They worked in pairs or small groups, led by guides who memorized the labyrinth and routes. The operation of this underground postal service was a feat of incredible logistics and human endurance. A typical courier run might start in a basement manhole in the besieged old town. The couriers, dressed in the barest minimum ingest boots, waterproof pants, and a shirt, would carry their vital cargo in rubberized bags or metal canisters sealed with tape. The cargo was as varied as the needs of a fighting city. Military dispatches between commanders, appeals for ammunition from a starving sector, intelligence reports on German movements, medical supplies, especially blood plasma and bandages, food for the most desperate pockets, and even the reels of the uprising's underground newsreel, which needed to be taken to a functioning projector. Perhaps most importantly, they carried personal letters. In a city where families were torn apart by the battle lines, the sewer couriers offered the only chance for a mother in Rodmi C to know if her son in the old town was still alive. They carried hope in their sealed bags. The journeys themselves were harrowing. The couriers moved in complete darkness, guided only by the feel of the brick walls and the sound and flow of the water. They used carbide lamps or small flashlights sparingly, as light could betray their position to German patrols who sometimes descended into the larger collector tunnels. They whispered passcodes at junctions. The stench was overpowering, the air thick and foul. The psychological toll was immense. The fear of getting lost in the endless tunnels, of being trapped by a cavern from a bomb explosion above, or of running into a German Jägerkommando. Hunting commandos sent specifically to clear the sewers, and the Germans did try to stop them. As the strategic value of the sewer routes became clear, the SS and Wehrmacht deployed troops into the main collectors. They set up machine gun nests at key junctions, dropped grenades, downed men, and pumped poison gas into tunnels rumored to be used by the Poles. The courier's job became a deadly game of cat and mouse in the dark. One of the most famous and tragic episodes was the evacuation of the old town in early September, as the German noose tightened and the district faced annihilation. The only escape route for the surviving fighters and thousands of civilians was through the sewers. Guided by couriers, a long, silent column of people, including the wounded on stretchers, waded through the chest-high putrid water for hours on a desperate, heartbreaking exodus to the city center. Many, weakened by starvation and battle, drowned or succumbed to the gases. It was a journey through hell to reach a temporary, and ultimately doomed, sanctuary. The sewer couriers were the shepherds of this exodus, knowing the way, encouraging the terrified, and bearing witness to suffering of an almost biblical scale. The legacy of the sewer couriers is etched into the soul of Warsaw. They were the nervous system of the uprising, the thin, dirty thread that held the rebellion together long after it should have been crushed. They enabled coordinated counterattacks, the redistribution of scarce resources, and, crucially, maintained the morale that came from knowing the struggle was unified. After the uprising fell and Warsaw was systematically razed by the Germans, the sewers remained as one of the few parts of the city's infrastructure not completely destroyed, a silent, stinking testament to the root of last resort. Their story is not one of glamorous heroism, but of a profoundly human, deeply unsanitary, an utterly essential form of sacrifice. It reminds us that resistance is not always about holding a rifle on a barricade. Sometimes, it is about carrying a bag of letters through a river of waste so that a city and a people do not feel alone in their darkest hour. The sewer couriers of Warsaw answered the call of duty not with a shout, but with a whisper in the dark, and with every step through the mire, they defied the tyranny that sought to drown their world in silence.